Well, hey, dads, and welcome to the Dad Nation podcast. Matt, never said that before. Feels kind of cool.
I like it.
I like it too. We are excited about this. The Dad Nation podcast is actually a new arm of our parent organization, Dad Camp. And so if you've never heard of Dad Camp, you need to check it out at dadcamp.org. Dad Camp's an events-based organization that creates epic father-child experiences in 4 states now and 12 countries. And we've got a vision of seeing a world where every family has a great dad and a mission to build stronger fathers who build stronger families. And we've been doing it for 15 years. And over these 15 years of growth and influence, we've been told by a lot of dads now that we could offer a ton of encouragement to all dads out there. And so we're kind of taking a run at it. We're starting this podcast and a YouTube video format, and we're gonna see how that goes. So welcome to all of you listening and watching. My name is Jason Braun, and I'm the executive director of Dad Camp. And with me, my co-host, Mr. Wisdom himself, Matt Crittenden. So how are you today, my friend?
I'm just excited to start this journey of the Dad Nation podcast with you, Jason.
So Matt, why don't you tell the Dad Nation listeners just a little bit about yourself, just to so we can kind of familiarize ourselves with our audience.
Yes, my name is Matt Crittenden. Probably one of the first and most important things I'd like for you to know about me is that I follow Christ, and just every moment of every day is marked by trying my best, imperfectly, but trying my best to love God and love my neighbor. I'm blessed with a God-given treasure. Her name is Jamie. We just celebrated our 11th wedding anniversary, March 27th. And I've been given the responsibility, the privilege, and the honor of being the dad to my 21-year-old daughter, Ryan, my 16-year-old son, Braden, and my 10-year-old son, Kylan. Jason, Kylan and I had our first Dad Camp experience in 2017. And I immediately understood the critical importance of the ministry and what fueled your passion for it. The following year, I remember we just really connected, sitting outside at a campfire, sitting outside the cabins. And you shared with me that night you just saw something in me while I was sharing some of my fatherhood wounds at that Saturday evening session, and that caught your attention. You invited me to join the board of directors that year, and I gladly accepted, just having seen firsthand what the Dad Camp ministry means in encouraging and equipping men to lead their families and their communities well.
And, what Matt didn't tell you is just, for me, he's an incredible friend and incredibly wise, as I like to call him, Mr. Wisdom. And I'm super just pumped about us doing this together. But
yes.
A little bit about me. Like Matt, I too am a follower of Jesus. I'm married to my wife Bridget for 25 years now. I've got the 3 best kids any dad could ask for.
Yes.
Excited that my oldest's getting married next year to an amazing young lady.
Wow.
I'm Canadian, but I've lived in the States for 29 years of my journey. I'm a huge fan of sports, but it's my allegiance is kind of all over the place. I'm from the Blue Jays in baseball to the Broncos in football and to Michigan Wolverine anything. So, don't hold that against me. Traveled to 48 states, took my wife to her 50th state for our 25th anniversary last year, which is really cool. And I've had the privilege just of leading this organization since its beginning in 2006. And I believe absolutely with all of my heart that being a dad is the single greatest privilege God could ever give a man. So,
yes.
So we're excited about this. We're taping this episode in our studio room here at Dad Camp headquarters in Kokomo, Indiana. And our plan is to release a podcast and video on the first Saturday of every month. And our goal for Dad Nation is, it's really simple. We just want to create engaging conversations, for all dads and helping them get stronger, believing that stronger fathers result in stronger families. And so that's why we're calling this the Dad Nation podcast, because again, we want to communicate that we're for all dads, and of every country, of every community, from any neighborhood. And if you don't know Matt and I and our stories, you will discover over the months ahead that we are very different and come from very different backgrounds, but we are also very much the same in our passion to help dads thrive. Because we're so different, we feel like our conversations can add some value to any and all dads out there, and for that, again, we're excited about where this might go. So Matt, why don't we just real quickly? We did this a few months ago in a video format, but being that this is the first podcast, why don't we tell the Dad Nation audience just a little bit about how we're different? So I'm going to just say a word, and you can just fire back the word that most fits you, and we'll kind of run through a quick list. Okay, so I'm white.
I'm brown.
I'm Canadian.
I'm American.
I would choose baseball.
I'd choose basketball.
Traditional family.
I'm in a blended family.
Soon to be empty nester.
Oh, my youngest is only 10, so we're in the elementary school stage still.
Present dad growing up.
I had more of an absent dad experience growing up.
Nonprofit ministry leader.
I am an ER physician.
I found faith pretty early in life.
I got saved and I was 37 years old.
Maple icing cinnamon donuts.
No. Protein shakes.
All right, we'll stop there. Because I just had a maple icing cinnamon donut, and you watched me, and you did not consume one with me, which was really
I was very tempted.
So lots of differences. But I believe that those things will allow us to connect with most anyone. And so we're starting by starting this conversation. We're going to work through a book called The Dad Difference by Brian Laritz. And it's a fantastic, I think, resource. I've probably read 3 to 4 fatherhood books a year since 2006. And this is, for me, it's one of the top on my list, honestly. And after reading it, I wrote down I think 15 different conversations that I think you and I could have together that I think would really benefit the Dad Nation audience. And there's a ton of content in this little book to discuss. So we got things actually rolling last month via our Dad Camp YouTube channel. Right. And we talked about establishing the one word that will define your fatherhood journey. And so if you missed it, I would encourage you to go find the Dad Camp YouTube channel, check it out, because we got a ton of really good feedback from our viewers. And but what we challenged you all to do is to really lean into to what word you feel will direct the vision that you have for your family. And Matt, you shared that your word is love. So remind us real quick why you chose that word.
Yes. I pulled that from Scripture, where the Scripture says to love God and love your neighbor. And I just shared that I feel like if I can lead my family toward that target and that aim successfully, we have a promise in Romans 8:28 that says that for those that love God, He works all things to their good. And so I just feel like we don't have to worry about circumstances that life throws at us. We don't have to worry about obstacles, the ups and downs. If we're loving God and He's working all things for our good, everything's going to fall into place.
And so, you didn't pick the benchmark word there or anything of the Christian faith and make it difficult for me to follow in your footsteps there by choosing love. So, set me up to fail here, buddy. But I chose the word wisdom. And it wasn't something I chose recently. This is something that I chose many, many years ago. And it's based out of a verse that's actually found in 3 places in the Bible. And I'll probably get this wrong going off memory, but Proverbs 1:7, Proverbs 9:10, and Psalm 111:10, I believe. But it's just simple verse, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Yes.
And I guess I just always have thought, if I can help my children, my family live wisely, that generally they're going to serve well and live well and do what God's kind of called them to be and to become who they've been, God's created them to be, and minimize kind of the collateral damage. We can't control everything in this world, but if we're making wise choices through and through, we can maybe minimize the kind of the collateral damage that kind of creeps in from time to time. And so that verse just reminds us that the beginning of wisdom is fearing God. And so
Absolutely.
we've had to kind of talk as a family, what does that look like? What does that mean to fear God? And we've just kind of, we've rested in this idea that it's coming under God's authority and under the umbrella of his authority. Just say, God's God, I'm not. God's ways are higher than my ways. God's thoughts higher than my thoughts. And I'm going to trust his thoughts and ways over my ways. And then the promise of Scripture then is when we do that, that's where wisdom begins.
Right.
Like we can't have wisdom, we can't live with wisdom outside of that. And so that's what I've told my kids over and over again. Fear God, knowing that that's where wisdom begins. And then when when you can live with wisdom, usually a life well lived. So guys, we encourage you to determine what that word is. A shout out to my father-in-law real quick, who actually emailed Dad Camp last week and was like, hey, loved what I heard, and my word is stewardship, and it really is. He couldn't have chose that is his word.
That's a great word.
He just feels like if he could help his family be good stewards with everything God has given them, that would be well done as a dad for him. And so, thanks for sharing that.
Yes,
Mick, appreciate that if you listen to this podcast. But guys, what is your word? And really, that is what kind of sets the foundation from everything else that really we're going to talk about, especially through this book, The Dad Difference. And so for better or worse, depending on whether you have a word, it will impact the legacy and the impact you have on your kids, having a word or not, I believe. And so that leads us to this month's conversation. The subtitle of the book is The 4 Most Important Gifts You Can Give to Your Kids. The 4 most important gifts you can give to your kids. And so probably for the next several months, several episodes, we're going to be talking about the first gift, and that is relationship. And it might sound simple, might sound obvious, but I think you're going to find that as we get into this, there's some profound things that I think we're going to be able to look at. And so Laritz says that the first gift of a dad must give his children is the gift of relationship. We cannot lead effectively those who we are not connected to intimately. Mm-hmm. We cannot lead effectively those who we are not connected to intimately.
Yeah.
And so he gets in this this idea of relationship, but sets it up by saying that the foundation of relationship is found in this idea of presence. Mm-hmm. And that we can't lead without presence. If we're not present, we're not going to be connected intimately to anyone. And without relationship, we have nothing. And so this all begins with presence. And as I've thought about this, Matt, and I know we've texted back and forth the last several weeks, it's really kind of struck a chord in us. There's some powerful thinking in this idea of presence. And so we're going to share a little bit of our story with our listeners today, and hopefully it's going to add some value. But Laritz in the book, he says this, and we'll get going. He says, as I've sat with people suffering from fatherhood wounds, the fountainhead of their frustration was rarely tied to incompetence or lack of money, but to his absence. So as he's discussed this, fatherhood wounds with people, that the fountainhead of their frustration wasn't that dads that they weren't qualified or equipped and did a bad job. It wasn't that they didn't have enough money and were a bad provider. It was rooted in his absence. And so he then says, showing up is most of the battle.
Yes.
Showing up is most of the battle. And as we share with you, what drives Matt and I, what drives this organization is this thing that's known as the father factor. And we know that 25 to 35% of this nation is living without a father at home. 25 to 30%, there's no presence of a father in the life of his family. And so, and we know also that there may be many more dads that, we could say they're physically present at home, but they're emotionally and mentally, they're pretty disengaged and absent, checked out. And so what happens then? We see the ramifications that when people are left with a father void, they begin to act out, and there's the woundedness of that, and the effects on our culture are staggering. And so, this idea, most fatherhood wounds are rooted in the lack of presence. And it's a powerful thought to think about, that just our presence alone can change things so much.
Right.
And but as he said, showing up is most of the battle. I think we also have to say that when you show up, it's how you show up that really matters as well. You have to add value.
Yeah.
Because we know that there are so many dads that show up, but when they show up, they're critical, they're angry. There's a lot of things that can happen in our presence that may affect our kids adversely. And
Your presence can be a negative impact
at
times.
It made me think of this story that I wanted to share, and I got to be very careful how I share this. This is a story about my father-in-law, and he still talks about this story to this day. So it obviously affected him. It obviously wounded him in some ways. But I don't want to take away that he had a great dad. His dad, incredibly well respected in the community, and he was a great dad. So that don't hear me on that. But
Right.
But every one of us as dads, and I can say the same, I have screwed up at times, and I've done some damage that I didn't mean to. And this is a story where his dad did some damage, to the point where he still shares this story today. But the reason I'm sharing it is the type of presence that we need to think about. And so the story simply is that he was a baseball player, a really good baseball player growing up. And he recalls times when his dad would be watching in the parking lot, sitting in his car. He would be, past the outfield fence, and he knew that his dad was out there watching the game. And he remembers different times when, if he struck out or maybe made a bad play in the field, that he'd suddenly see the lights go on in his dad's car, and his dad would fire up his car and drive away.
Oh, wow.
And he still talks about it that day, and just what that did to him. Like, in that moment, it was suddenly, I don't have what it takes.
Right.
Like, I'm not living up to your standards or your expectations, and it was damaging. And so the type of presence is also critically important as we talk about this. So let's talk about a little bit about our childhood stories of presence. I'll go first, and then I'll let you go. Mine, I had a very present dad. And my story is one that is that my dad's basically made a decision that his story was not going to be my story. My dad, at the age of 13 in 8th grade, left home never to return because he lived at a home where he was told he would be a good-for-nothing and worthless piece of you-know-what the rest of his life. And so my dad got out from under that and basically then had to live life proving to his dad that he wasn't a good-for-nothing, that he did have value, and just living in the woundedness and the void and the lack of presence of his father. And so he said, I'm not going to let what happened to me happen to my son. And so I got the blessing of having a father that was very present. He was, as I can recall, at most everything. I'm sure he wasn't at everything, but my recollections tell me my dad was at most everything. He was the dad of all my friend group that everybody's like, your dad's awesome. He was the favorite dad of the group. He was engaged. He was my coach in baseball with stuff. He would play with us when we were younger, even when we go over. He'd hang out with us. He took me places. He included me in his work trips. My dad had his faults, and he's not a perfect man by any means. But this was not one of my dad's faults. My dad was present. And so what did that do for me? I think it gave me very clear expectations in life as he was present and he was showing me the way. I had very clear expectations, which gave me security. It gave me stability. As a result, I did well in school when he was one that never even finished 8th grade.
Wow.
I did really well in sports. I just had that foundation of that from that presence from me. And I think he gave me a vision of what a godly man looks like. So I knew what following Jesus looked like. But his presence gave me something to follow and model after, and just gave me confidence as when I became a young man leaving home. I feel like he really set me up to win because of his presence. And so I got the blessing of that power of presence in that way. Share with us your story.
Yeah, it'd almost be the exact opposite of your story. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old, And my dad ended up moving, geographically away from us. And that story sort of ended up, it's interesting that you say, my dad couldn't have been at everything, but it feels like he was. And mine would be the flip side. I know he didn't miss everything, but it feels like that. My baseball games, my soccer matches, my basketball games, my football games, plays, recitals, some award ceremonies for some academic achievements that I was really proud of. He wasn't there. And one of the toughest things was just very few holidays together. And I don't remember him being present for any of my birthdays. And so you talked about not only presence, but what are you doing with that presence when you're physically there? I remember times that he was there, but he was sort of checked out.
Yeah.
He was in sales at the time, and I just remember a lot of times that he took a week for us to be together, but he was on his phone doing sales stuff a lot. And so what effect did that have on me? Well, it was a lack of identity. I struggled with who am I? What is it to be a man? What is manhood? What is the target or destination that I'm aiming for?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a song called "Looking for Love" by Johnny Lee, and he says in that, "Looking for love in all the wrong places," and that would really define my adolescence, my teenage years, even my young adult years, just flailing around, sort of not knowing where to get this information from. And so, in trying to grow into a man, I had bad advice, bad information from bad sources, bad role models. Was just completely seeking my self-worth in things that can't fill the hole of a dad's absence. And so it's funny, early on in my childhood, regardless of that absence, when my dad was present, physically present, I thought he was the best thing ever. He could do no wrong. And as I grew and got into my teenage years and my young adult years, it became more like of an anger, a resentment. Yeah. And I really said to myself, how can I mean so little to him? How can I be such a low priority in his life?
Wow. So we wanted to share, the presence of our fathers, that part of our story as boys and young men. We have a part 2 that we're going to share next month that's going to focus more on the power of presence of our fathers in our lives as adults, as men. Mm-hmm. And for you guys listening, you've got to hear the second part of Matt's story. It is so powerful. But before we push pause on this month's podcast, we want you guys to give you guys 2 things to think about. First, think about the power of presence, as we've talked about that. Guys, we all know that sometimes being a dad is overwhelming. We're like, man, we feel like we're over our heads. We don't know what's going on. So I wanted to kind of take you back to the statement that we started with to kind of give you some encouragement. It's this: as I've sat with people suffering from fatherhood wounds, the fountainhead of their frustration was rarely tied to incompetence or lack of money, but to his absence. Showing up is most of the battle. Mm. So my encouragement, guys, just show up. Just show up, because you have no idea how incredibly powerful your presence is. But then also don't forget that the type of presence, when you're showing up, it also matters. Presence builds confidence, security, and identity when it's done right. But lack of presence, it will shake those things. So ask yourself this question: do your kids value your presence? Does dad being home fix everything, give confidence, and provide security? In the book, he just talks about this really cool story where his dad is away on a business trip in Chicago. I believe they lived in the Atlanta area, and there's a bad storm. And so he was fearful. His mom was fearful. And so they got on the phone with his dad, and his mom passed the phone to him at the end of the conversation, and he just said to his dad, "Dad, we need you home." And his dad's response was, "Okay, I'll be there."
Yeah.
And he said that night, his dad walked in the door, and just the security in knowing, of having his dad's presence just made it all kind of be okay.
That's right.
There's incredible power in your presence, dads. And I like to think of this as I thought about this, like this could be our superpower as dads. Like this could be the superpower of a dad, our presence. So think about the power of presence. And then secondly, if you can't be present, communicate the why. Like, guys, don't beat yourselves up about you not being able to be at everything. You're not going to be able to be at everything.
You can't
and
be.
That's okay. But if you communicate why, that's how you keep your superpower. That's how you keep your credibility and the trust of your kids. And just be sure to let them know why you can't be there. Let them know, how much you missed not being there. Again, he says in the book, he talks about like he set out his calendar with his kids and just be like, all right, kids, I know this is on your schedules and stuff, but I'm not going to be able to be at this or this, but here's why. And he said what that did, by carefully explaining his absences, it just made his kids feel relationally cared for, and they were okay with that. And so remember, the power of presence, and if you can't be present, just communicate with your kids the why.
And I would add, guys, when we do promise to be present for our kids, we have to do everything in our power to honor that promise. I know that things happen and we can't always do it, but do everything in our power. And the reason why, when we say we're going to be there and we're there, we say we're going to show up and we actually show up, that's how we maintain an honesty and integrity with our kids. We can so easily bankrupt our integrity and our kids' trust if we don't take those promises seriously.
For sure. All right. Well, I really look forward to picking this up again next month because there's so much more in this whole idea of presence and how that creates relationship for our kids, this first gift. But Dad Nation, pick up a copy of the book, The Dad Difference, if you get a chance. And then don't forget to check out dadcamp.org and get dates for the upcoming Dad Camp 2021 events. Guys, Dad Camp's an unforgettable experience for you and your child. And this is what we say, your annual deposit into your life as a dad, and where you will make memories with your kids that will last a lifetime. And I don't think there's absolutely no better place to practice the power of presence than at Dad Camp. And then remember, registration week for all of our 2021 events is the last week of April. So go to the website, check it out now, get dates, and so that when April 24th comes your way, you're ready to go.
Yeah, guys, set a calendar reminder now. With the growth that we've seen the past few years, we fully believe our dad camps will fill to capacity quickly like they did last year. So don't get left out.
Boom. Guys, we'll see you next month for part 2. We're going to dive again deeper into this power presence. Come back, hear Matt's story, so powerful. And as we say, you have what it takes because God has gifted you with this calling and privilege of being a dad to your son or daughter. You have what it takes. And so go do whatever it takes to being the best father that you can be. Thanks for listening to the Dad Nation podcast, and we'll pick this up again next month.